Hi guys! Today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in April. I didn't quite get to my entire TBR, but I think I made a pretty good dent. I had a couple arcs, I had a lot of 4-star reads, and I did unfortunately have one DNF. So let's dive right in. I started the month with an arc of Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This also came out towards the beginning of the month, and oh my god, this was so amazing. I previously read her Elements of Cadence duology, The River Enchanted and A Fire Endless. Those were her adult books though, and I wasn't sure how I was going to react to her YA books. Her writing is very atmospheric, but I did like the way that she handled some of those more mature relationships in Elements of Cadence. But oh my god, Divine Rivals was even better, honestly. This is book one, I believe, of a duology, and it is very inspired by World War I. It does take place in a fantasy world where there are some minor magics as well as these dead gods that have come back to life and are at war with one another. They kind of have a Hades Persephone dynamic, but like if the relationship was really sour. They've recruited human beings to the cause, and again, it's very World War I sort of vibes. You have trench warfare, the technology feels of that time as well, so that's sort of the setting we're working with. We follow these young rival journalists. The girl is Iris, and she comes from a very poor background. Her brother has gone to war and she hasn't heard from him since he was recruited a year ago, and her mother has developed a drinking problem. So she works at a newspaper to try to provide for her mom, and there she is competing for a permanent staff position with a boy named Roman, whose background is the complete opposite. He comes from wealth and he's very privileged. So when he started, he pretty much figured that this staff position was his and wasn't anticipating competition, but they have a really fun sort of workplace rivalry. But beyond that, Iris is writing these letters to her brother, and for some reason, she puts them in her wardrobe because she has nowhere to send them, and they disappear. And she's not sure if they're making their way to him or not, but one day she finally gets a response saying, "This is not your brother." So that's kind of the setup and just the transformation of Iris and Roman's relationship throughout this book, through the trauma that they both go through, is so incredible. Again, the atmosphere is just top notch. Rebecca Ross is so good at cultivating that. I could not put this book down. I read it in a single day. I cried so hard at the end, and it was just so immersive. These characters felt so real, and their relationship just hit me in the gut. Oh my god. So if you like sort of historical fiction inspired fantasy, this is an excellent one to pick up. And if you like World War I era stories, I would definitely recommend picking this up as well, because it definitely has those vibes. But yeah, overall, this was incredible. I need the next book like yesterday, and I gave it 5 stars. After that, I knew I needed something a little bit lighter because Divine Rivals was a bit of a gut punch. So I picked up the last book in the Saints of Steel trilogy by T. Kingfisher, and that is Paladins Hope. This one is a bit shorter than the previous 2 installments, and it feels a bit different. It's the first queer relationship in this series. We follow Galen, who previously featured in the last 2 books, as well as a mortician named Piper, and he was in book 1 briefly, but not like a main character at all. Seeing them meet and navigate a blossoming sort of relationship is really cute. The mystery that was introduced in book 1 kind of wrapped up in book 2, so I wasn't really sure what we were going to be focusing on in particular with this book and sort of what the context of their blossoming love would center around. So again, it does feel a little bit different from the previous 2 installments, but it still definitely feels like of this world. This is sort of an offshoot of another Teen Kingfisher series. I believe it's called The Clock Tower Wars, and the first one is Clockwork Boys. And this book of the 3 Saints of Steel series, like books in the series, references those books the most, which was interesting because the first 2, again, like kind of reference it, but it's not that big of a deal, whereas this one has some pretty big elements that I believe were introduced in those books, and I haven't read those, so I was a little lost at first, not gonna lie, but I feel like I had enough context to make my way through. But the love story in this is really cute. I really enjoyed it. I wanted a little bit more, but I can see why it was shorter, and I'm kind of sad the series is over now. So I still have a couple books left to read in this world. Looks like Clockwork Boys, The Wonder Engine, and Sword Heart. So those actually I think all take place before Saints of Steel. I ended up picking these ones up first, but that's totally fine. I think they stand on their own really well, but I am glad that I still have some books to go back to because this world is really charming. I like the fantasy elements, and T. Kingfisher's writing is always enjoyable. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up The Magician's Daughter by H.G. Perry. I've never read this author before, so this was my first foray into her writing, and this was all right for me. I really liked the setting, the atmosphere. We start with a young girl named Biddy who lives in an island off the coast of Ireland that no one else can get to. It's magically sort of protected and veiled from the world. And she lives there with her adoptive father, who is a magician, and he goes off in the night to gather magic, and she's not quite sure why. He's very secretive about the outside world, and while she's curious about it and wants to go out into it to adventure at some point, he's very hesitant to allow her to do that. And she has access to books and stuff, but she's never had any firsthand experience with other people. So I really liked the mystery at the center of this, you know, like why wasn't she allowed to go to the mainland? You know, what exactly was so dangerous about her leaving this island? What was her adoptive father's sort of secret life entailing and his background? So I quite liked that. Like the world building was pretty cool. It does take place like in what is our world, but if there was like a magician's council in Europe, and I thought those elements were really interesting. Her father has a familiar who takes the form of a hare, and he is so charming. I loved him. He was probably my favorite part about the book. This had a lot to say about like magic and like what that entails for society, and I thought it was cute. But about halfway through, I definitely felt my momentum slowing. I wasn't as eager to pick up this book. I wasn't really quite sure where it was going. And while ultimately I liked where it ended up, it wasn't like life-changing. It was a fine read, but it didn't, you know, rock my world. The writing was good though, and I did like the characters. So it wasn't quite as adventurous and addicting as I was hoping it would be. So I gave this one 3 stars. Then I finally picked up the first book in the Murderbot Diaries, All Systems Red by Martha Wells, and absolutely loved it. This was another one-sitting read for me. It's a novella, so very doable. This was so fun. Like, I thought I knew what Murderbot was going to be about going into it, but, like, I did not know. Like, I was not anticipating how charming Murderbot themselves was going to be, and their dynamic with humans is really interesting. So if you don't know, this series follows a sort of hacked security unit. They've given themselves free will and have to kind of be on the down low about it so that the company that built them doesn't decommission them. They're sent out on these excursions with parties of humans on these sort of undeveloped planets in order to protect them from native wildlife and such and other dangerous situations. The job is pretty easy until one day it isn't, and we follow them on an adventure when humans on the planet start to go missing. All Murderbot really wants to do is to be left alone to watch their soaps, and ultimately does end up feeling quite compelled to protect the people that they're with. This was a really fun adventure, and I can't wait to dive into the rest of the series. I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was a great start, and I can't wait to read more by Martha Wells. Then I borrowed A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon from my library, and this was all right. I think this is another romance that initially started its life as a Reylo fanfiction, and I don't have any issues with that, but I wasn't quite sure how I was going to feel about this one, so that's why I ended up borrowing it from the library. As the title suggests, this is a fake dating trope scenario. Our protagonist, Mariel, is a witch who was prophesized to have great power, but has so far kind of just been a disappointment to her family. She doesn't have a great command over, like, kind of what feels like the basics of magic, but she does have quite the magical green thumb, and like that's what she enjoys. One day when she's practicing her magic, she ends up trying to, I think, summon like flour or something like for baking, and ends up accidentally summoning a demon named Ozroth. And by summoning Ozroth, she has sort of entered a contract with him in which she must trade something for her soul, and he won't leave until she does. And she's like, I don't want to give my soul away. Your soul is what connects you to magic. So also if she gives up her soul, she will cease to be the person that she is, as well as cease to have magic at all. So that's awkward. They do find themselves kind of drawn to each other though, because Ozroth himself secretly has a soul that he did not mean to obtain, but it has fundamentally changed him, and he finds himself very drawn to Mariel's energy and her liveliness, and he doesn't quite know why. I think it's a really fun setup. I do like the actual like plot of this book quite well. There's sort of an environmental aspect to it, again, where she's very connected to nature magic, but her family doesn't really take that very seriously. Along with that, Mariel has to deal with very narcissistic parents, and that was the plot line that I ended up having the most issue with. Like, the way her family acts is like cartoon villain, and ultimately, like, yeah, this is a romance about a witch and a demon falling in love, so like I'm not going into it necessarily for the realism, but like I just feel like that situation with her parents was not handled well because it came off so silly, and I feel like that kind of thing shouldn't come off that ridiculous. And like I know some people really do act this way, but again, it just felt like very like mustache twirly horrible, and I don't know, so it just kind of took me out of it and ultimately ended up kind of affecting my enjoyment of it. I did think the romance was pretty good and developed nicely and had sort of realistic issues and road bumps that sometimes feel forced in romance, but ultimately I did give this a 2 out of 5 stars. It wasn't like the worst thing in the world, but I was definitely skimming it by the end, unfortunately. So I'm kind of glad I didn't buy this one and I borrowed it instead, but I don't think it's like a bad book. It just, certain elements did not work for me personally. Then I read book 2 in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor, and this series is so immersive, but it hurts my heart so much. It's like so angsty. And for good reason. I mean, the relationship at the center of this book like has its issues to work out. So there's that. But this book follows a young woman named Karu and her relationship with her chimera family, and then she also meets an angel named Akiva and learns that the angels of this world that he comes from are at war with the chimera, and sort of what that means for her personally. I can't really dive too deep into the details of this one without some pretty major spoilers for book 1, but I thought this was excellent. I think the way that Laini Taylor writes these political situations between the chimera and the seraphim, who are the angels, is so well done. Just like the commentary on war and stuff is really well written, and it makes you feel a little empty inside. So this was a bit of a heavy read, but I thought it was really well executed. I think I actually liked this one a bit more than book 1 even, so I ended up giving this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how she concludes this series in this next month, because it is she's so good. I don't know, she's one of the best YA writers out there, honestly. Like, I think the YA range of books gets a lot of flack for not feeling like super well developed a lot of the times, or like kind of immature, and like Laini Taylor just blows those accusations out of the water. She is such a masterful writer, and I've loved both of the series that I've read by her so far, so I need her to write a lot more, a lot faster, because I'm almost done with her backlist and I'm sad. Then I picked up a much anticipated new release, and that is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I actually pre-ordered this one from Barnes & Noble, and it came in actually quite quickly for a Barnes & Noble pre-order. If you know, you know, but I got it on Thursday of the week that it released when it came out on Tuesday, so that was pretty good. But this one's quite short. I read it quite quickly. I think 2 days maybe. It's like 250 pages. So this is a standalone Southern Gothic horror novel, and it was more fun than I was expecting, which was a surprise. The only other horror novel I've read by her, The Hollow Ones, is one of the most terrifying books I've ever read. Not, I think, for everybody, but it ticks a lot of my own boxes of things that like freak me out and give me anxiety and make it hard to sleep at night. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect with this one. I haven't really read a whole lot of Southern Gothic before, but where I knew she was capable of scaring the hell out of me, I was a little scared of this one. So the main character of this one is an entomologist named Sam, and she's like a archaeoentomologist. Like, she goes to dig sites and studies like dead bugs and stuff. It's apparently a real job. It seems very interesting, but the project that she was working on has been suspended, and she's already sublet her apartment, so she ends up living with her mom for a short time. While heading there, she's a little apprehensive because her brother, who talks to her mom a little bit more than she does, has noticed that something has been off with mom, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna investigate this while I'm staying with her. Immediately, yes, something is strange with mom. She's a little more paranoid. She is acting a little bit more like religious than she normally has in the past. She's got this weird kind of racist painting hanging back up that used to belong to her grandmother, and Sam is like, what is going on with mom? At first, things seem all right, but they definitely, in the fashion of a horror novel, seem to cascade into bigger issues, and the house itself seems a little weird. The house used to belong to her grandmother, and she notices out in the garden where her grandma very obsessively cultivated some roses, doesn't have any bugs, and as a bug person, she's like, that's super weird. But I can't really dive too much deeper into the details without giving some things away. Again, this is quite short, so I think if you're looking for again, I keep using the word fun or reaching for the word fun because it is just T. Kingfisher's writing style is like, or at least the narrative voice she gives this character is a little quirky. And while there definitely are some scary elements in the last third of this, it still maintains an air of more adventure, I think, rather than like true horror. So I think if you're wanting to check out the horror genre, but you're a little terrified too, this is probably a good place to start. It's not overwhelmingly scary. It does have scary elements, but it didn't keep me up at night. So I did have fun with this. Wasn't my favorite T. Kingfisher read, but I had a good time, and I gave it four stars, more of a 3.5, but it was good, and I had fun. No regrets. Then I picked up Wicked Fox by Kat Cho, and unfortunately DNF'd this one. I got about 100 and so, like 30 pages into it, and it just was not working for me. I think the setup is really interesting. We follow a teenage girl who's also half fox demon, and she must consume the energy of men to stay alive. She does this by targeting like specifically bad people, like guys who have sexually assaulted women or like committed some other sort of crime like that. Like, she doesn't want to target good people. And one day a young teenage boy ends up witnessing her fighting off a goblin, and he's like, whoa, I didn't realize this stuff was real. But they kind of save each other, and then she also ends up transferring to his school in traditional YA/manga fashion. So again, the setup was really fun, and I thought like this could be a really great adventure, like YA story. I feel like I could get really engaged with this, but like the writing felt so bland. I was starting to get bored, and like this scenario should not have bored me. I didn't think the characters had a very strong narrative voice. Again, they just felt like super bland, specifically like the main character. I don't even remember her name right now. Mi Young. And I just like, she didn't have a personality. So I don't know, I just was not feeling this one. It was super sluggish, and like I said, I was bored. So I do think this setup would work really well for like an anime, but in the written form, it was not working for me, unfortunately. So I did decide to go ahead and DNF this one since I just was not enjoying it, which is a huge bummer because I've had this book literally for years. I think this was in my first book haul on this channel. I got it from Book Outlet, and I've been excited for it. I just haven't been quite in the mood for it, so I'm very disappointed. But I don't rate DNFs kind of as a rule, so I didn't rate this one, but I did DNF it, unfortunately. So we'll be unhauling this as well soon. Then I picked up Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk, which is a little novella. I kind of described this in my Goodreads review as like if Supernatural had a like film noir episode that was super gay, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. Definitely had an air of like tragedy to it, which like the name sort of implies, but I did quite enjoy the adventure on the way. We follow a gumshoe detective type character as she takes on this job, and it seems to involve some sort of ritual sacrifice in this world that is not unheard of. There's demons and stuff, angels around, so that's what kind of gave it the supernatural vibe to me. And there's also this society of magicians that the main character was exiled from for some reason. Really, all this character wants to do is go hang out with her girlfriend, which, like, that makes sense. But this job is very intriguing, and she knows it's, like, a really big deal and she shouldn't get involved, but she's too curious not to. So I don't want to say more than that because a little novella, there's not a whole lot more to get into without some big spoilers, but I did think this was really well written. It feels very of like that era, like the way that people speak and think feels kind of like an old movie. So I think if you're not prepared for that, that could be a little confusing at first. There's definitely some vernacular that I was like, whoa, just not like how modern people speak, but I liked that. It felt very immersive. So I had fun with that. And I think if you're looking for like a quick sapphic read, this is definitely a good one to pick up. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then finally, I had an arc for this, but I didn't finish it before its publication date in typical Lexi fashion. I think partly because I was not ready for this series to end, / scared that it was going to disappoint me, / it was kind of heavy and I had a hard time not powering through it. I don't want to say I did enjoy this read, but it had a hard time locking me in for like hours at a time because of all of those things. But I did finally finish it, and that is The Bone Shard War by Andrea Stewart. This is the 3rd and final book in the Drowning Empire series, a series that I have been engaged with since it came out. It was one of my first like book reviews on this channel was for The Bone Shard Daughter, and I don't know, I've felt very connected to this story for its entirety. And again, I was just kind of like scared to read this last one. I was like, oh god, I don't want it to be over. I love these characters and this world. And also, like, what if it's bad? It wasn't bad. So, you know, before you watch any more of this, just know that it was not bad. I did have some issues with it, but overall, I still enjoyed it. So I think like Bone Shard Emperor, which is book 2, this one had a little bit of pacing problems. The first half feels very slow, and I don't think it's bad slow. It's just slow. So like if you're not prepared for that, it feels a little bit sloggy. The political situation in this book series is it's a mess, and the main characters all know this, and they're trying their hardest to fix it in a way that they think feels appropriate and right by the people, and like they don't all agree, which is where the crux of the problems in this series come from. So we're following characters with like drastically different viewpoints, and there's some like very large mysteries that have not been totally unveiled. And again, that's another driving force of this book in particular, is characters trying to figure certain things out, and it's just taking a while for them to get there, which is a little frustrating. Like I said, I used to really love this world. I thought the magic system was really interesting. The Bone Shard magic has always been really cool to me. The Oscelin animals are really cool and, again, mysterious but very charming, and I've always enjoyed that element of this series as well. I don't know, I'm still like processing the end. It wasn't bad, I wasn't disappointed, but I did feel gutted by certain things, which, you know, you expect a good book series to do that to you sometimes, so I wasn't totally surprised by that, but I'm still processing. I don't know, it's very complicated. It's hard to see something you love so much come to an end, and I think that's part of the bittersweet feelings that I'm having. But yeah, I don't know if this last book's gonna work for everybody. I did enjoy it, even though it had its problems, and I gave it like a 3.75. It wasn't quite a 4, but it wasn't a 3 either. So I can't believe the series is over. I'm still mourning it. And those were all the novels that I read this month. I am currently about a third of the way through Redemptor by Jordan Fueko. Didn't quite finish that in time for this month, and I'm about 10% into the way of In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune, which was another arc that I was hoping to finish before its publication and did not. So those will roll over into next month, unfortunately. But I did also manage to read some manga this month. If that's your thing, feel free to keep watching. If not, feel free to skip to the end. So my friend Stephanie came up last weekend and we filmed a little shopping vlog that will be up soon, but we'd like to just sit and read together, especially manga is something we've really been bonding over lately, which has been really fun. And she brought up this series for me to read and let me borrow them so I could talk about them in the wrap up. And that is the first 3 volumes of In the Clear Moonlit Dusk by Mika Yamamori. And this is a shoujo, I believe, and follows a main character, Yoi, who has a very androgynous look to her. She's the black-haired one on the covers. She is known at her school as the prince because she acts in a very like chivalrous way that makes a lot of the girls kind of go heart eyes over her, and they're like, oh, if she were a boy, he would be so dreamy. And she has very complicated feelings surrounding her appearance. Like, she doesn't want to change herself, but she feels very awkward when this boy Ichimura approaches her and tells her like, wow, you are so beautiful. And initially Ichimura thinks she's a guy, and when he learns that she is in fact a girl, he's even more intrigued by her and like wants to get to know her. So she's not sure how to deal with that, and it's not something that she's ever been approached by before. So they have kind of like a slow burn thing happening. They're both intrigued by one another, but don't know how to navigate those feelings because he hasn't ever been as invested in a girl as he has been with Yoi. So it's new territory for both of them, and they decide to date, but like they have all these conditions and stuff. It's kind of like a trial period initially. So that's kind of what these first 3 volumes cover, and it was very cute. I gave each of these about a 3.5. I'm interested in the setup. I think it's adorable. The artwork is really pretty, and I'm curious to see where this series goes. So thank you, Stephanie, for letting me borrow them. Then I read the first 2 volumes of Yona of the Dawn, which is a very popular, very long manga series. I feel like I've been seeing this everywhere lately, and I found these first 2 books used as well as the next 3 for about $5 each, which is a really good deal. I was really happy to find those and pick them up and finally see what all the hype is about. So this story follows a young princess named Yona, and I believe it's her 16th birthday in the first novel. So she is quite young, and she's the princess of this kingdom called Koka, and I don't really know how much of the first volume to talk about. Something horrible happens and she must go on the run, and her bodyguard Hawk is there to protect her. This is like the first time she's even left the castle, so it's very uncharted territory for her, and she finds that she has to harden up really fast. That's pretty much all I'm gonna say about these first 2 volumes. They're really good. I like the art style a lot. Hawk is very dreamy. And yeah, I've been very engaged with this series. We just started the anime as well, and we're only a couple episodes into that. I haven't quite gotten to the point in the anime where I'm at in the manga, but I'm very excited to continue both of them. They've been a lot of fun. I can see why this is a very popular series. It's a lot of fun. I gave them both 4 stars. So yeah, that wraps up my April reading. Again, didn't quite get to the amount of reading that I wanted to. I think certain books slowed me down a little bit, but that's fine. You know, you gotta take it one at a time. So I feel pretty good about what I did manage to read. At least it was pretty much across the board 4 stars with 1 or 2 exceptions. So I feel pretty good about that. Please let me know down in the comments what you read in April. I'd love to hear what you read, and if you've read any of these, I'd love to talk about them. Thank you for watching. Feel free to follow my socials down in the description box, like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, have a lovely day.